Spirit for our gathering hymn. One more step, verses 1 and 2 only. Well, there'll definitely be more than one more word today. That'll be certain. I'm Reverend J. Wolin, the settled minister here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Sarasota, and I welcome you and so happy to be with all of you this morning. I especially want to welcome visitors this Sunday, whether you are here in person or online. We welcome you and look forward to getting to know each other better. If you'd like to get on our email list, there's either, if you're here in person, right outside the sanctuary door, you can sign up. And as well, if online, there is a link on our homepage under visitors to sign up to get our weekly newsletter. And as well, of course, after service, we always have coffee and some snack as a way to try and spend some time together. So we have just a few short announcements today. First, today, the first Sunday of each month, we invite anybody who wants to become a member after the service to come into my office to meet with myself, the board chair, and somebody from membership. My office is in the building right across from here, the Lexau building. So we invite you about maybe 10 minutes after service, get a cup of coffee. You want to find out, even if you don't want to join, but you have questions, just feel free to come in and meet with us. Secondly, what else? Oh, okay, Equality Florida, this Monday night at 7 p.m., sponsored by our Interweave team. They are sponsoring Equality Florida Resist and Strategy Community Meeting to bring together the LGBTQIA community and its allies and accomplices here in Sarasota to really come together to strategize what to do about some of the challenges our state government is imposing. And what else? I think that's really the only two announcements. Did I miss any announcements? Anybody? Nope? Okay. All right, so now I invite you to rise in body and or spirit for our opening hymn, number 159, This Is My Song.
Good morning. My name is Linda Bodycomb. Hi. As Unitarian Universalists, we are in an active conversation to adopt a new principle, the eighth, which calls us to build a multicultural, beloved community through our actions in the hopes we can dismantle racism and other forms of oppression in ourselves and in our institutions. This effort will help us correct the mistakes of colonization of this country. To that effect, the UU Service Committee financially supported a course in Indigenous history in South Florida this winter, which 3 of us from this congregation were able to attend. Among other things, we learned about crafting land acknowledgements to honor the ancient peoples who used to live here. Many UU churches have land acknowledgements that they share each Sunday or several times a year. Maybe we'll get there too. Here's one possibility for us. To be in right relationship with all that is, we hereby acknowledge the indigenous peoples whose land we now occupy and use as our own. The Calusa, Uzita, Tocobaga, Timucua, and Seminole peoples who lived here before us were effective stewards of the land and were often buried in shell middens here. The Angola, a freedom-seeking community, also lived here. They are now known as the Black Seminoles. Tribes came here to avoid hurricanes and to fish our waters. With gratitude, we acknowledge the original inhabitants, the soil, the ocean that provided them sustenance. We honor these indigenous peoples. We desire to be better stewards of this land. For the welfare of future generations, we will take active steps to learn from the indigenous population who are still with us, especially the Miccosukee, Seminole, and Black Seminole tribes, which live just a little bit further south from us. Let us correct the mistakes made in the past by healing and honoring our relationships with these peoples who were here before the Europeans came and colonized these lands. Please join me in the chalice lighting, Catherine Bonner, and looks like, oh, Carrie is going to help. As we light this chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, we affirm our sixth principle, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all.
Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure I'm on. There I am. Our story today is Mama's Nightingale, a story of immigration and separation, written by Edwidge Danticott, illustrated by Leslie Staub, and adapted by myself. When Mama first goes away, what I miss most is the sound of her voice. At night, while Papa's asleep, I sneak out of bed to listen to my Mama's greeting on our answering machine. T'emprikite bonsi nouveau pour nous. Please, leave us good news. But one night, I accidentally erased the greeting, and I can no longer hear Mama say those cheerful words. We have no good news. For 3 months, Mama's been in the Sunshine Correctional, a prison for women without papers. What papers? Papa says she needs papers that say she belongs in this country. Can't she have mine? I asked. No, she can't, Papa says sadly. Every night after dinner, Papa sits at the kitchen table and writes letters to the judges who send people without papers to jail. He also writes our mayor and our congresswoman and all the newspaper and television reporters he has ever heard of, and no one ever writes him back. So Papa and I visit Mama every week. When she sees me, Mama runs to me, picks me up, hugs me tight, and tells me how much she has missed her little wool seal. In Mama's Haitian stories, a wool seal is a beautiful nightingale who loves the taste of a sweet cottony fruit called soursop, just like I do. Mama leans over and hums the wool seal's song in my ear. The melody is as soft as Mama's touch and as sweet as a real soursop. I sit on her lap and breathe in the smell of coconut pomade in her hair as she and Papa talk. Soon the bell rings and guards come to take Mama away. I kick and scream and beg to stay with her. Tears run down Mama's face as she's led away. The guards tell Papa not to bring me again until I can behave myself. In the car on the way home, I miss Mama so much that my belly aches. I fall asleep and dream of the visit, except in my dream, Mama comes home with Papa and me. A few days later, a package arrives in the mail from Mama. In the envelope is a cassette with a card that says, "A bedtime story for Saya." That night, Papa tucks me in, pushes the play button, and before tiptoeing out of my room. Suddenly, the room is filled with Mama's wind chime voice telling me a new bedtime story, one she had made up herself. It's about a mommy nightingale who goes on a very long journey and is looking for a rainbow trail in the sky so that she can return home to her baby nightingale. I close my eyes and I imagine her whispering the story in my ear. So the next time we visit Mama, I do my best not to cry. I sit on her lap and kiss her whole face. I don't ask when she's coming home because she doesn't know either. Each week, a new tape with a new story arrives at the house, and sometimes the story is as sad as melted ice cream, and other times they are as happy as a whole day at the beach. One day, I find Papa looking at Mama's picture, and he's very sad. When I ask, "When is Mama coming home?" he looks like he's going to get angry, but then he bites his lower lip. I think, Mama may never come home. I must do something. "Papa, can I write letters too?" I ask. "Of course," he says. "You can write your own story." So I took Papa's advice, sat down, and I wrote my story of Mama and my family. And when I was done, Papa sent my letter to the newspaper reporter that he had been writing to. Well, a few days later, a lady reporter left a message saying she wanted to print my story in the newspaper for everyone to read. And the next day, a TV reporter came to interview Papa and me for the news. Papa tells how Mama was arrested by the immigration police while working in a restaurant, how Mama came to America before she met Papa and before I was born. Well, because of all the phone calls and the letters to the prison from people who had read about us in the paper or saw us on the TV, Mama was brought before the judge in a week's time. And I'm so happy. The judge says Mama can come home with Papa and me while she's waiting for her papers. I feel like running up to the bench and giving the judge a big hug. Finally, Mama is home with us again. And at bedtime, I pick out my favorite story. A smart and brave little nightingale helps her mommy find the right rainbow trail, Mama says, and the mommy follows it home. I like the way Mama's and my story ends too. I like that it is our words that brought us together again. So I read this story today because so many children like Saya and adults like her parents live in fear every day that their world will be upended. So many immigrants leave their home country to escape poverty, hunger, war, natural disasters, and crime, to end up at our borders and are separated and or forced to return to their native country that they were fleeing. The Unitarian Universalist Service Committee actively works around the world and here in the United States to stop family separations and to give immigrants fair and humane treatment. We are so blessed to be part of their work. So now I invite our younger UUs to meet in their classrooms where we will explore this month's Soul Matters theme of resistance. Thank you.
So now I remember what the announcement was that I didn't make earlier. So I'm just very pleased to be able to, I'll be co-leading this service with Linda Bodycomb and with Mary Ann Bowie. Linda is our UUSC representative from this congregation. Our centering words today are by Joanna Macy, who is a eco-activist spiritualist, I guess I would call her. This is a dark time, filled with suffering and uncertainty, like living cells in a body. It is natural that we feel the trauma of this world. So don't be afraid of the anguish that you feel, or the anger or the fear, because these responses arise from the depth of your caring and the truth of your interconnectedness with all beings. End quote. And so I think especially at this time with so much going on, not only in our community, but our country and the world, at least specifically, I want to raise up just what happened this past week about the shootings in Nashville and how this country continually values guns over our children's lives. And so it was this that I invite us to go into a moment of silence to reflect upon all the trauma and what we feel about it and what we can do about it.
UUSC is an 80-year-old international human rights organization grounded in the principles of Unitarian Universalism and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
UUSC partners with over 50 locally led grassroots organizations around the world to advance human rights.
We work with communities affected by natural disasters and humanitarian crises, including ethnic minorities facing a campaign of genocide in Burma.
We partner with First Indigenous peoples to advance their right to self-determination in systematically addressing the loss of their homes, their livelihoods, and their cultures due to the impacts of climate change.
And we support the right to safety, dignity, and justice for Central Americans in Central America, along the migration route, and in the United States.
We can only do this work because of the support of individuals and congregations like you. Please join us.
So, in 1963, the Unitarian Service Committee was started by the merger of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee was started by the merger of the Unitarian Service Committee and the Universalist Service Committee after the two denominations consolidated in 1961. Can you hear me okay? No, I'm hearing a lot of no's there. I could barely hear it. Okay. Let me know just raise your hand if it's not loud enough for you. The Unitarian Service Committee was actually founded in 1939 through the courage of Unitarian minister Reverend Waitstill Sharp and his wife Martha Sharp. PBS produced a great documentary on the story entitled Defying the Nazis, The Sharps' War. And the movie included, I'm going to start with here, a reading from Waitstill Sharp's journal. So this is a quote. I had done a full day's work at the church, and I decided to spend an evening in front of our fireplace. The telephone rang, and it was probably the most momentous call I had ever received. Hello, Waitstill? I knew who the voice was, the voice of my closest friend, Everett Baker. Will you and Martha come over and talk with me at our house? I am inviting you to take the first intervention against evil by our denomination. Could you start immediately, please? Martha replied, we felt something should be done. Refugees in the Sudetenland, which was part of Czechoslovakia and Central Europe, have been murdered. People had been imprisoned and hurt. I responded, we have two children, a very tiny daughter. How many men have you offered this to? 17, Baker said. And do I understand they've all turned you down? Yes, I think a war is definitely coming, and they don't want to be endangered. As my wife, Martha, and I went home under the starry skies, we went home with a promise to do it. End of reading. This was the beginning of the Unitarian Service Committee, and this story is just quite remarkable. In 1939, Waitstill and Martha Sharp left a successful parish ministry in Wellesley Hills, Massachusetts, and they left two small young children to go to Czechoslovakia to help refugees escape Europe. In addition to facilitating the delivery of condensed milk, they traveled throughout Europe obtaining visas and job offers to help intellectuals, political prisoners, and especially children escape from Europe. Without question, these people would have died otherwise. The Sharps did this mission for a year before their imminent arrest forced them to move their operations to Portugal, where Martha was named area director for the Unitarian Service Committee. Now, the connections and the structures that the Sharps created in Europe allowed the Unitarian Service Committee to hire others to expand their original mandate. And interestingly, they also, as now we're getting more documents being released, we find out that they also were, the Unitarian Service Committee was helping coordinate for the British and American intelligence services in Europe. It was really, really kind of amazing what we did back then. And throughout the remainder of the war, the Sharps remained in Europe and as well Asia to support relief and relocation efforts. And after the war, Waitstill returned to parish ministry, and Martha had a lifelong career supporting human rights and working for human rights until she died in, I think, her 90s. Sadly, they divorced soon after the war ended, and coincidentally, Waitstill Sharp's first ministry after World War II was at the Unitarian Universalist congregation of the Quad Cities, the last congregation I served before coming here. And very interestingly, I was told by many of the longtime members that he never once, not even once, talked about his experiences in World War II. Yeah, it was really, really fascinating. But in 2005, the Sharps were recognized by the State of Israel as righteous among the nations. So they were the second and third of only 5 Americans who were ever recognized with this prestigious award. It's an honor given to non-Jews who risked their lives to save Jews during the Holocaust. As writer and Holocaust survivor Eli Wiesel wrote, and I quote, "In those times there was darkness everywhere. In heaven and on earth all the gates of compassion seemed to have been closed. The killer killed and the Jews died, and outside the world adopted an attitude either of complicity or indifference. Only a few had the courage to care. These few men and women were vulnerable, afraid, helpless. What made them different from their fellow citizens? Why were there so few? Let us remember, what hurts the victim most is not just the cruelty of the oppressor, but the silence of the bystander. Let us not forget, after all, there is always a moment when a moral choice has to be made. We must learn from them, and in gratitude and hope, we must remember them." End quote. And it's true, every day a moral choice has to be made, some large, like the Sharps, and some very small. Reverend Bill Schultz, who's the former UUSC president, said, and I quote, "It's easy to feel small in comparison to Waitstill and Martha Sharp," end quote. It's true, not everyone can just drop everything to risk their lives to help someone they do not know. The Sharps and the foundation they laid for the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee is a model for what is possible when we are committed to help others. We believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, our first principle, not just Americans, every person. Every human life is sacred. The Sharps acted upon their promise, but they could not have achieved what they had without the moral, spiritual, physical, and financial support of many others and the institutions that made this type of work possible. Each of us can participate in this type of work, either large or small. One way you can support our institutions in a very small way is one small way that you can support the institutions that do such work is by your generosity in our weekly offering. You had to know that was coming. So for those online or those here on your cell phone, there is a link in the YouTube channel. We just ask that you be as generous as you can to support the work of this church. Let this sacred time begin.
Good morning. I have the wonderful honor of leading our UU Green team. It's good to be back. This is actually my second career here. I served as president of this congregation in the 1990s. Back in the 1980s, when my children were just beginning elementary school, I became a very active member of this congregation with my family. I was influenced by the UU Service Committee to care about the environment on a global scale. My first global foray into the world of sustainability was attending the World's Women Conference for a Healthy Planet in 1991, where the Earth Charter was in workshop. I learned that a sustainable world is one of balance of people's needs, the community, and the environment. Social justice is environmental justice. And the UU Service Committee is one of the influencers and one of the main influencers of nations on a global scale. I became a sustainability advocate, first as a national speaker, educating fellow city planners. Then I grew the local economy, the local green economy in Sarasota. I sponsored and facilitated 7 years of monthly Green World Cafes, published the first local green pages, certified 231 green businesses, and even opened a brick and mortar green building store, which kind of closed in 2009. Not a good understanding of what was going on globally in the environment, in the economy. Now, I lead the UU Sarasota Green Team. We are so proud of our accomplishments this year. We have confirmed our status as a Unitarian Universalist Green Sanctuary. We developed a Healthy Soils pamphlet, provided forum speakers, presented the vernal equinox service, and have been gathering petitions for the Florida Clean and Healthy Water Initiative. Last month, in an action initiated by the Green Team, our UU Sarasota Church Board adopted the precautionary principle, which will influence all future purchases. This policy ensures a higher level of environmental protection. With this clear direction, all of us can now be sure that toxic chemicals will not be used in our building cleaning products or in our landscaping. Was it my UU leadership that gave me the courage to move forward with a free and independent search for meaning? Or was it observing the UU Service Committee take actions that mattered? How do you inspire someone to be an environmental activist and a leader? More importantly, how do you inspire a family, a neighborhood, a community, a city, a state, a country, or the world to understand and believe that we have to be the change that we want to see? That is what the Service Committee is successful at doing. It was an influencer before the word was discovered in social media. I invite you to visit the UUSC website. For example, you'll read, in alignment with UU principles, and by centering the voices of community, and by upholding their right to self-determination, the Service Committee and our partners are actively seeking a pathway to corrective justice from hundreds of years of colonialism and imperialism. The UU Service Committee is seeking a path that is transformative, redemptive, respectful, and sustainable. And most importantly, one that reflects the multiple needs that communities require on the ground. I urge you to become a member of the UU Service Committee today. This will allow the continuation of the UU Global Voice and support of individual and group actions. According to Paul Hawkins' book, Blessed Unrest, there are hundreds of thousands of organizations doing important environmental work. I know in my heart that the Service Committee, networking with these organizations, will provide the leadership necessary to solve the environmental, economic, and social injustices that now exist on Earth. Your membership matters. Thank you.
Great energy. As you know, social justice work is an integral part of the fabric of life at UU Sarasota. I applaud the work led by the members of the social justice team and all of those who step up to help. Partnering with our folks here, I agreed to serve as liaison to the UU Service Committee to help advocate for the spread of social justice and the advancement of human rights beyond our county and the South Florida borders to the international world in hopes of being able to effect systemic change in a world needing much healing. I have always been interested in social justice work since I got a degree in social welfare and then was a paralegal doing legal and social work in Eastern Kentucky and Appalachia during the war on poverty in the 1970s. The cases our legal firm took on hope to make systemic changes just as the UU Service Committee does. It was a great first job, one of my favorites. I often get asked about what the Service Committee is doing for Ukraine. Most recently, the UUSC has been helping Ukrainian refugees who have fled to Poland and to Hungary. Great countries, huh? The UUSC donors have contributed nearly $1 million toward this effort. UU Service Committee partners distributed food and clothing, cooking supplies, generators, and a host of other necessities. They are providing legal services and counseling, which is necessary for those asylum seekers to stand up for their rights. They're also teaching migrants of color, like students who had to leave the Ukraine that were from other countries. They were attending colleges and they needed to flee. Can you imagine being right in the middle of your studies and having to leave and not knowing where you were going? They're giving them the tools to push back against those in the new countries who abuse them because of the color of their skin. No other non-government organization or NGO is providing these services to Ukrainians who had to flee to other countries. Now, on Wednesday, I was so lucky to have this happen before I got to speak with you. There was great news from a tiny Pacific Island nation of Vanuatu. That's a big word to say. They won a historic vote at the United Nations that calls on the world's highest court to establish the first time the obligations that countries will have to address the climate crisis and the consequences if they don't. Vanuatu has long been faced with disproportionate impacts of rising seas and intensifying storms that have been destroying their land and displacing their people. In 2021, with the help of the UU Service Committee, a small group of young adults launched its call for the UN International Court of Justice to provide what they call an advisory opinion on the legal responsibility of governments to fight the climate crisis, arguing that climate change has become a human rights issue for Pacific Islanders. They presented their convincing case to a meeting of UUSC donors in Boston this fall, which I and a few people in our congregation got to experience. They were really inspirational. The adoption of the resolution at the UN General Assembly this week is only the first step of this process. The resolution will be on its way to The Hague next. Governments will be invited to file submissions to the court starting as early as this fall, with the hearings going on the next 2 years. Surprisingly, the US did not support the action, and neither did China. But they didn't stand in the way of the vote, so it was considered a consensus. Can we help? You bet. We can write letters to our representatives to support the action. UUSC will reach out to us for support and solidarity during the process, and I will keep you up to date and let you know how you can help. UUSC also steps in when there have been huge disasters like Hurricane Ida and Ian, or in Haiti, where yet another earthquake has laid additional waste to that poor country. These are just a few of the international efforts. One of my favorite stories was the convening of peoples from several nations who are being displaced by effects of climate change. The UUSC invited activists to Alaska from South Pacific Islands, Louisiana, and several Alaskan communities to come together to share mitigation coping efforts they use in their communities as the seas try to claim their ancestral lands. The convening was a way to share best practices as well as form a coalition yielding stronger voices back in their home countries. With the new skills they learned, plus with the backing of more nations, their governments now listen to them and respond better to their predicament. During this meeting, the UUSC committed to continue to help with smaller nations with mitigation efforts like they did with Vanuatu and the UN. What initially attracted me to the UUSC was the fact that they work with marginalized groups. The ones left behind, where the bigger NGOs step in to help, and then they leave when the crisis is over. UUSC doesn't leave. They don't tell the people they're going to save them or suggest a one-size-all-fits solution. UUSC partners with the local groups affected by the disaster or abuses and asks, how can we help you? Where and when is the help needed? There is no assuming on their part. UUSC is a small organization with only around 40 members. They're not a big organization like the Quakers American Friends Service Committee. So working with partners on the ground is a great model for them to follow. Their goal is to help create a larger footprint for the partner than they would have if they were working alone. And they don't have to spend a lot of time reinventing the wheel because they hope, because the partner is very connected to the environment and what is needed by their people. UUSC finances all its operations through donations made by congregational members and donors. No funds come from the UUA. They are a separate organization, and although they do some joint projects from time to time. I hope one of our stories this morning has encouraged you to want to be a supporter and a part of this great program. You can join or renew your membership today by filling out the envelope that you found in your order of service. You can mail it in yourself, or you can give it to me after the service, or you can take it to the office and leave it there. Or if you're tech savvy and you want to mail it, you can do it by joining through the website, and that information is on the back of your order of service. Just so you know, the funds are being used extremely wisely, and the UUSC gets an A+ rating with Charity Navigator. $40 will make you a member, and if you like, $150 will be matched by the Shelter Rock congregation on Long Island. If you haven't heard of them, they have a huge endowment left by a former friend, not a member, but a friend of their congregation, and now they use all that money to finance social justice projects. If you happen to be looking for a worthy philanthropic cause, I would invite you to contact me after the service or by getting in touch with me later. I would love to talk with you about the opportunity to help you make this kind of difference in the world. Thank you in advance for your generosity and support, knowing that we are all interconnected. Please join me in singing the closing hymn, The Fire of Commitment. The words are by Reverend Mary Catherine Morn. She's the present president of the UUSC, and it's one of my favorite songs, or hymns, I should say.
Our closing words are from Reverend Bill Schultz, the past president of UUSC, from his essay, Hold On. What undergirds a religious commitment to justice? It is not that we can solve everybody else's problems, but if we can provide such things as equitable enforcement of laws, a self-sustaining planet, and a fair distribution of the earth's abundance, those conditions will open up enough time and space that most people will have the wherewithal to solve their own. May it be so. Please join me in extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you all for your presence here today. Thank you.